and welcome to another edition of the reality show with the Ayn Rand Center UK. I am Kirk Wilcox, and today I am joined by some of our common co-hosts like Marco and Richard. Hello today.
Hi.
And we also got the capitalist pig, Jonathan Honig. How's it going, Jonathan? And I'm not hearing anything. Am I the only one? I think his mic might be muted.
I'm here, and I'm great to be with you, with Marco, with Richard, and our whole audience from around the world.
All right. So today we have a few topics to talk about. What should we get started today? I guess there's this story out of communist China, not to be confused with the Republic of China, also known as Taiwan. I guess China wants to ban clothes that hurt the nation's feelings. This is according from an article out of the BBC by Kelly NG. I guess they have a draft law banning speech and dressing detrimental to the spirits of Chinese people. And it sparked debate in China. I guess it's resulted in some backlash. A lot of people in China are confused over this. And say, I guess the law is pretty vague. And as we know, this is a common tactic of authoritarians. They have these vague laws that are impossible to understand, so they can apply it arbitrarily. But what do we think about this law coming out of communist China? Why don't we start with Marco and Richard?
Sure, absolutely. Well, we're wearing our Ayn Rand Center UK t-shirts today just to stick it to the Chinese. I'm sure they would be banned there, probably be banned here before long. Who knows? But yeah, no, absolutely. When I first read this, I read it as a draft law. It's actually a draft law, but that probably means it's going to come in anyway, given it's China. I think it's ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, I've heard within the article that you quoted earlier, the Chinese academic said that it could lead to the infringement of personal rights. You think in China, really? I mean, I'm surprised they're not asking everybody to wear like stripy prison uniforms for like total conformity, given it's so you can all be slaves to the state. I mean, this is quite ridiculous. The idea that you can undermine the spiritual feelings and that you can have a law which is so poorly defined in the first place is frankly ludicrous.
Yeah, how do you offend the Chinese who lives in a communist dictatorship by making them free? I mean, work that one out. But I like the phrase detrimental to the spirit of the Chinese people. Again, as Richard said, you live in a communist dictatorship. What's going to offend you so badly? And it's like, to be honest, if you see the article, and I don't know whether the link is available, but it's on the BBC website, there is a picture of two girls who wear something really bizarre, and if that's not a crime against fashion, it should be banned. I don't know what.
Yeah, I mean,
I was thinking. Oh, go on, Jonathan.
No, Kirk. I was just going to say it's so foreign to us. I think, especially as objectivists, because it's just so collectivist. Like every element of it is so collectivist. The idea that you can offend the Chinese people, like there's a spirit of the Chinese people, and this notion that how you dress has any impact ultimately on anyone else. It's so offensive, I think, to us. And, it made me think of a quote from Rand. It's from Galt's speech, and just talking about this notion of a dictatorship. She writes, every dictator is a mystic, and every mystic is a potential dictator. A mystic craves obedience from men, not their agreement. He wants them to surrender their consciousness to his assertions, his edicts, his wishes, his whims. And what is more of a whim than saying, I don't like the color of your suit?
I don't know, guys. It seems like every week I'm seeing some article out of places like the Wall Street Journal that talks about how the future prospects and economic prospects of communist China are looking bleak and meek. And I don't know, maybe this is the way they're going to finally turn things around, is fashion codes, nationwide fashion codes, because that's what the people in China are really afraid of, is not the bleak and meek economic prospects, but they're afraid that the spirit of China might be offended by certain fashionable wearings.
I'll just jump in here. I mean, look, China's prosperity has gone down as their authoritarianism has gone up. I mean, you guys know this, Mark and Richie know this. It's like, they had that great renaissance of loosening up, of liberalizing a lot of economies. their quality of life soared. Now they're going the other way, and that's why their economy is more abundant. Their stock market is not far from a decade low.
Absolutely. And recently, their unemployment figures, particularly for the youth, reached 21.3% before they stopped reporting them altogether. Now, this kind of law seems aimed at the youth particularly. So it suggests a sense of paranoia within the Chinese leadership.
Yeah, every time a dictator comes up with something called public security law, like we want to keep you guys safe. It just reminds me of the takeover of Hong Kong in 2020, really. The first thing to go is the security laws, and then next is going to be people in the papers that are trying to be free. They're going to be jailed up and disappear from sight, really. It's but what's quite worrying is the noises that Xi Jinping tends to make recently. He tends to talk about China. His communist dictator is collectivist by definition, but it seems to push to change a gear, speed up the collectivist rhetoric, especially when he talks about the red gene. It has begun talking about these things like being a Chinese is something that runs into your blood, and that's, to be honest, it's quite sinister rhetoric that he's following. That doesn't seem to be picked up in the Western media.
Yeah, this sort of reminds me, there was this recent documentary series put out on HBO about George Carlin and his career, and they talked about his legal troubles, especially pertaining to the First Amendment. And I think they talked to one of the people that filed a complaint with the FCC against George Carlin or the radio station that aired his content. And he said something along the lines of, yeah, George Carlin has his free speech, but shouldn't he be expected to maybe sacrifice a little bit of his free speech for the sake of the public interest or some gobbledygook like that? But I guess according to this article, there seems to be a little bit of a backlash against this within China. Do we think this is a positive, maybe encouraging sign that maybe people in China are fed up with the CCP shenanigans?
Well, definitely the Chinese youth are used to using social media. Are used to being kind of freer than the older generation that grew up in rural areas. Certainly, there are lots of young entrepreneurs, and they've been used. Probably the younger crowd, the younger generation, never knew anything different from what looks like a market economy, and so they're used to it. And taking that away from them is going to be a really tough fight, I think, for Xi Jinping.
Absolutely. I think one of the sinister things that this reminds me of is Dr. Ferris in Atlas Shrugged, when he's talking to Reardon, and he says, did you really think we want those laws observed? We want them broken. Because if you pass laws that can neither be observed nor enforced or objectively interpreted, you create a nation of lawbreakers, and that way you cash in on the fear. And that's if you look at it from a sinister aspect, that's kind of what this is. If anyone can determine whether they're offended by your T-shirt in any way arbitrarily, then you're at risk of becoming a criminal at the whim of the government. And that's a frightening prospect.
Yeah, if you're a dictator, those are the best laws you can come up with.
Yeah, I mean, it almost reminds me like the Iranian religious police who, will pick up women or men off the street and say, I don't like your dress, or this dress is offensive, or this outfit is offensive. And, yeah, I mean, it's sinister. And as you guys mentioned, I mean, there's so many elements of Rand's writing that speak so directly to this truly sinister dictatorship. One thing that it reminds me of, I forget exactly where it is she talks about, the loss of freedom of speech as one element of a real dictatorship. Like when you don't have the ability to speak anymore, that's really one of the tenets. And, this is all over that as well. So, here in the States, people are very worried about China. They think China is this massive new power. I don't see it at all. And the more oppressive they get, the weaker as a country. And unfortunately, the worse all those people's quality of life will become.
Yeah, the only thing that slightly annoys me is when business leaders from the West and heads of state go and meet Xi Jinping and, effectively lick his ass. And it's just so depressing to see a Western power, a Western company go in there and legitimizing the dictator, because the worst thing you can do is legitimize these guys instead of condemning for what they are. you go there by association, you show that people that, oh, look, our great leader is revered in around the world, and that's, you know, you cannot empower evil by a default of the good.
I agree.
Is that how you say his name? Is it Xi Jin? Is that how you say it?
Xi Jinping. Yeah.
Because I try to, I always thought it was something along the lines of Winnie the Pooh, because I guess he doesn't like being called or compared to Winnie the Pooh. And there have been laws in China that like have outlawed Winnie the Pooh, I guess. So I kind of like to do it out of spite, because he is a gigantic butthole. Let's be real. We got some super chats from.
Sorry, that sounds like a t-shirt in the making there with his face on Winnie the Pooh. I think we should, you know, there's a business opportunity there. Sorry, Kirk, please go ahead.
Oh, no, it's all good. I just want to give a shout out to Robert Nasir, who has a $2 super chat, a fashion fantasy for fascism fanatics. Got a nice alliteration going, tongue twister, fantastic. A fashion, can anyone say this 10 times fast? A fashion fantasy for fascism fanatics, fantastic. Good stuff from Mr. Nasir. Thank you, and feel free to share your thoughts in the chat with us here on YouTube, and give us some nice super chats if you want it read aloud on the show. Any other thoughts on this topic about communist China? I know, Jonathan, you mentioned that it reminds you of the morality police in Iran. The BBC article at the end says, in 2019, the Chinese Communist Party issued morality guidelines, which include directives like being polite, traveling with a lower carbon footprint, and having faith in Mr. Winnie the Pooh and the party.
Well, and it's that same collectivism, right? I mean, it's not obedience to the religion, the religious faith, but it's to the people or to the China, the greater spirit of the leader or whatnot. I mean, that's some collectivist, and of course, at the center of it is the sacrifice of the individual. What was from the forward of We the Living, Rand writes, volumes have been written about the issue of freedom versus dictatorship, but in essence, it comes down to a single question: do you consider it moral to treat men as sacrificial animals and to rule them by force? And she, the Pooh, does.
All right, so let's move on to the next topic today. It looks like we have a couple of stories about prison escapes in both the United Kingdom and the United States. We have this one story that was another story out of the BBC about this man. I haven't really heard much about this. His name is Khalif. What is it? I'm not seeing the first name here, but I guess he might have ties to the Islamic Daniel Khalif, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I guess he escaped from the Wandsworth prison on Wednesday, and I think there are concerns that he has connections with the Islamic Republic of Iran. There was another prison escape in the United States in Pennsylvania. This is from CNN, from Noran Salalihi. I'm probably mispronouncing that. I'm sorry. This is from September 7th. Video shows murderer who escaped a Pennsylvania prison using the same route as another inmate who broke out in May. And these are some pretty alarming stories. I mean, these are violent criminals. It looks like in Pennsylvania, they managed to crab walk between walls and climb fences with razor wire. I mean, every time I look at razor wire, I cringe. I'm like, that can't be fun to deal with. But what do we make about these prison escapes that we're seeing in places like the United States and the United Kingdom? Does this suggest anything about the state of prisons? Do prisons need any sort of reform? I know this is somewhat of a controversial topic, but what do we think about these reports from prison escapes?
Well, I mean, there's nothing to do about reforms. It's about put a flipping grate on top of the place, on the area where the other guy escaped. I mean, the prison said, I'm talking about in Pennsylvania here. The prison said, oh, we are well aware of the vulnerabilities of the prison. It's like, well, then do something about it. All they've done seems to have put some razor wire, God knows how, because we haven't seen it. But if you see the video, the guy actually, explain, just talking about it sounds like, James Bond jumping around. So actually, he just quietly walks up the wall and clearly gets away with it. It's like, what the heck?
Yeah, absolutely. And in the UK example, it's a guy who hides under a food truck with a couple of straps attached to the bottom of the food truck. And even though there's like three gates and 2 security pens, and they're supposed to check with mirrors and look on the top and underneath and inside the truck every time one goes in and out, obviously that failed on multiple occasions, which, you know, it's enormous incompetence, really. And people, you know, obviously not taking pride in their job and understanding the importance of, you know, why they're there.
I mean, the British case is particularly preposterous because the guy was a former soldier who was found going through some records and gathering information which could have been used for terrorist acts, and also apparently built a fake explosive device. And he was placed in a low security prison, and he was placed on kitchen duty. I mean, now I might be weird, but I think that putting somebody accused of terrorism and giving them access to knives and all sorts of implements seems to be stupid. And then he gets away with it like under a ban, under a kind of lorry thing. And I mean, to do that, you must be fairly well organized. You need something to hold your weight. It's like an episode of the A-Team when he gets the welding stuff under the van and puts the hooks on and hooks himself in and goes through the 3 gates and the 2 pens. It's like, I mean, it's just couldn't make it up.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I don't know much about the prison system, I must admit, but, you know, I do know in the States, at least, there's a lot of people locked up for non-violent drug offenses. So I think a good start, maybe in terms of reforming prisons, is to have less people in them for non-objective crimes, you know, and some of that process is going underway. I mean, Ms. Rand, I think, has wrote a little bit about this issue, and I'll share my screen briefly. This is from the letters of Ayn Rand. She says, punishment should be guided by retribution, not reform. And that's a pretty big thing now. We hear like, oh, we've got to reform criminals. You know, I won't read it all now, but, you know, she talks about punishment should correct the consequences, impose restraints and on the criminal, and then make the punishment proportionate to the crime. So, you know, read what Rand had to say a bit about it, but needless to say, she didn't think that, I believe that prison is a place you should go to, you know, draw pictures and learn how to be a better person. She thought you should go there to pay do the time for the crime you committed. Shouldn't be fun.
Yeah, and you bring up the fact that a lot of prisons are overcrowded, especially in the United States, because we have a lot of laws that should not exist. So people who don't belong in prison end up in prison. But according to the BBC article about the UK cases, I guess the prison unions are saying it's a lack of staff and a lack of funding for the prisons. I'm not really sure on how the prison system works in the UK, but I don't know about this because I would like prisons to be well funded and well staffed to where we avoid escapes, especially from violent criminals. But then there's the cynic in me that is like, is this just unions looking for more kickbacks and money? I don't know.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't be too wrong, I think, in assuming that, because yes, it's true that they're overstretched. And there should be more people to look after the overfilled prisons, because as Jonathan said, you know, everybody who misgenders somebody gets into one. And so yeah, perhaps they should have more staffing, but definitely the unions are playing silly buggers about this one, to be honest, because every time something like this happens or there is a certain accident, you never hear the union saying, well, we should sack this guy because he's clearly putting us in dispute or whatever. No, they just close up like a good, you know, mafia clan, and they hide all the stuff. I mean, I think there was a discussion yesterday about the police. Same thing was happening. If you have a unionized body of work, people unionized, they tend to do the minimum possible because they are a gang who hold the power. So, I mean, the Justice Secretary made a statement to Parliament. Effectively only said like, okay, guys, let's check the paperwork. It's like, well, okay.
And this is the problem. When government is doing too much in all sorts of areas of life, it's then stuffing up on the basics. And this is absolutely the basics of what government should be getting right.
Right. I mean, this is one of we talk about what's the role of government. Richard, you're absolutely right. This is one of the real major functions of government: catching the criminals, keeping them off the streets, keeping us safe. So, I mean, let's get rid of everything else, the green initiatives and everything. This is something they should really, focus on. And Marco, to your point as well. I mean, I read a study in the last couple of weeks that unionization at a firm in the market world results in almost an immediate loss of value of the firm. We can put it in the show notes or whatever, but in effect, as these institutions like the prisons are unionized, of course, they become less efficient, and this is the result.
Yeah, absolutely. And here in Britain, you're seeing unions really stretching their muscles at the moment, whether it's in teaching unions going on strike, whether it's health service going on strike, or transport workers going on strike. A lot of it happening all at once, really, as a follow-up to COVID and a chance to squeeze more money out of the taxpayer.
Now, I am wondering, is this cause for alarm? And I think in a way it is, especially according to the CNN article. It mentions that the daughter of the woman killed by the Pennsylvania prison escapee told police that he was going to do something bad. I mean, these are violent criminals. This is a cause for at least some alarm, because violent criminals are getting out of prison, and that's going to be a danger to innocent people. But then again, according to the BBC article, it mentions that prison escapes in the UK have fallen dramatically since the 1990s. So while it is cause for alarm on the local level, is this really a highlight of a bigger issue with prisons, especially if escapes have fallen a lot over the last, and I think I saw similar trends from the United States. I'd probably have to personally research more into this topic, but from what I can tell, maybe not. What do you guys think?
Well, I'll quickly just jump in and say, I think it's kind of one of the nice things about having a Second Amendment is that if you're an escapee, you don't know who's got deadly force, at their, in their holster necessarily. So, you're not just avoiding the police if you're running from the law, you're avoiding any honest citizen who might have the capacity to use deadly force. So, I think it's maybe one example. I tend to be more on the side of the Second Amendment and the fact of just, being thankful it's there, that there's other people that can protect us when there's criminals on the run.
But John, what I think someone else might say, because we have the Second Amendment, if a dangerous criminal gets out of prison, then that increases the likelihood that they would get their hands on a gun. What about that?
Well, it's like saying when we outlawed drugs, right? There's gonna be no drugs available because they're outlawed. So I think the guns are out there. Even in Chicago, where I live, there's plenty of guns on the street, despite the fact they're completely outlawed, I believe, in probably the whole state. Certainly in the city. So, I'm happy that they're responsibly used, but ultimately I rely on the police to not just keep these criminals off the streets, but to Marco and Richard's point, keep them locked up appropriately in jail.
I think one of the reasons there's been fewer prison breaks is to do with things like technology, though, the ability to put cameras everywhere and have more technological means of stopping people from leaving prison. But at the same time, you've had the opposite trend among staff, people who are either religious or moral apologists for the people behind bars. And then there's just too many people willing to assist them afterwards, particularly when they are on the run.
And in the case of Daniel Abed Khalifa, I think the issue here is, did he actually get, was the thing actually organized? I mean, the guy was suspected to work for Iran. So did somebody keep an eye on the prison and the various movement of the various lorries and help him? Because that sounds a bit weird. I mean,
highly worrying.
Well, if no one has anything further to say about the prison topics, we can move on to our final topic of the day, which, according from this is coming from The Guardian, written by Ajit Niranjan. It's actually from a few weeks ago, it looks like. Anger is most powerful emotion by far for spurring climate action, study finds. I guess this is according to a study which asked 2,000 Norwegian adults how they felt about the climate crisis, found the link to activism was 7 times stronger for anger than it was for hope. So what do we think about this? The fact that it looks like a lot of the climate activism, they're not motivated by a positive, but rather by negatives. They're motivated by anger rather than hope. Is this surprising to anyone? What do we think about this?
Well, that's quite funny. I think the article bemoans the fact that people are getting scared, and that leads them to be less active activists. The stupid narrative that is going around, like climate emergency, we're all boiling, all this kind of stuff. People are actually demoralized. They think, oh, there's nothing I can do about it, so they stop attending rallies and stuff like that. I mean, this is based on a Norwegian sample of, I think, 2,000 people, something like that. But yeah, I think it's the lefty side that's getting a bit scared by the fact that they're overdone the scaremongering, and people are reacting the opposite way. Instead of panicking and taking over the streets, they're actually just thinking, man, there's nothing I can do about it.
And the other thing I think is, in breaking news, activists are angry. Well, who knew? I mean, they're driven by emotion. What a surprise. And I think that's what's interesting here, is this article is talking about how it's sadness, fear, and on the positive side, I use that loosely, behavioral change comes from hope. Well, why doesn't it come from thinking, from evidence, from facts, from dealing with technology and innovation and progress to solve the problems of the day, rather than emotion as being the starting point for everything, and how many people give up?
Yeah, I mean, when I see the climate movement now, it to me seems so nihilistic. It's like they go to a museum and they splash paint on the canvas and then do a sit-down strike there, glue themselves to a famous. So it just seems like hell-bent on destruction rather than anything positive. It makes me think of what Rand talked about, motivation, I believe, by fear versus motivation by love. Kirk, as you said, focusing on the positive. So I think, Richard, we're activists, we're focused on the positive, using facts and reality as your point. So the climate movement just seems so nihilistic now, and that's kind of maybe just a comment on the day.
I mean, to be honest, it's a test case for what happens during a more vacuum. All sorts of stupid ideas fill the void, and these guys are, of course, they don't know, they're groping around trying to find something that gives a meaning to their life and to what they see happening around them, and they just react on a feeling basis. It's just a shame that they could just reach over, read the Fontenelle, read Atlas Shrugged. The answers are there. They've been there for 70 years. All you have to read a nice piece of fiction, and suddenly the answer to your questions will be mostly there.
And you can see in the activist movement, though, there is generally a fatigue, which is leading to apathy, because you can't stay in permanent crisis angry mode year after year, living on the edge of your own emotions. It eventually wears you down and leaves you grey and depressed and unable to get out of bed. So perhaps that is the answer for these people who ride that way, is eventually they'll suck out their own life. And the rest of us can get on with ours.
One thing, Kirk, I'll quickly just say, I remember one of Dr. Peikoff's podcasts, he made mention of, I think it was something that the ecology movement was what this group picked up after the Vietnam War ended. In fact, this was kind of the next cause. But, at least the Vietnam War, I feel like those activists, those protesters, they were going to be drafted. So on some level, they were advocating for their own lives. The ecology movement, which is what they called it in the 60s and I think early 70s, now the environmental movement, is just so nihilistic and at its core, at its end. And you saw it in the 90s with what they called the Earth Liberation Front. These people used to go just torch Range Rovers and torch big SUVs. And now with this current day movement, which is blind to technology and just so anti-capitalist, as Rand illuminated it decades ago.
Speaking of capitalism, I forgot earlier to shout out Ashley Shrugged with a super chat, who says these guys are Cape fearing their way out. I'm pretty sure that was in response to the prison stories. But then I also need to give a shout out to Mary, who did not give a super chat, who says my computer won't super chat. So she sent it to my PayPal. I checked my email and saw that she sent me $50, and I forwarded it in the super chat myself, $50 for the Ayn Rand Center UK. So it has my name on it, but we should really be thanking Mary. Thank you for your generous contribution to. Yes. What a great show today. Now, I have something to say about this topic. I have a couple of quotes from a particular individual, 2 different speeches. Said, adults keep saying that we owe it to the young people to give them hope, but I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear that I feel every day. Here's another quote from the same person at a different speech. You come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my childhood and my dreams with your empty words, yet I am one of the lucky ones. And I'm pretty sure anyone want to take a wild guess at who I'm speaking about here?
Yeah.
Is somebody Swedish?
Is it Saint Greta?
Yeah, I call her Greta No Thunberg the Great. And yeah, when we see these stories about how climate activists, they're not motivated by positive, they're motivated by anger and panic and whatnot. And I don't find this surprising when the poster child for this, the hero that's been put up on a pedestal, is going around telling everyone, I don't want your technical solutions. Why are you worrying about economics? I want you to, I don't want your hope. How dare you even hope? I want you to panic and feel the fear that I feel every day. And there's a part of me that, you know, obviously I think they're, a lot of this is nuts, but I can get why from their perspective, they're angry when they see that, you know, every day when I check my Apple News Plus app, there's some new article about how climate change is making something worse. A significant portion of the media and the political class have made a big fuss about climate change for decades at this point. And even, you know, a lot of people like Leonardo DiCaprio, they're always making a big speech before he goes off and parties on his gas guzzling yachts. Politicians will make a big fuss about it to get elected. And then at best they do half measures like a carbon tax here, an electric vehicle subsidy over there. And if you're someone that's really bought into this, like, and you're freaking out like, oh my God, the world's going to end. And all these politicians who claim that they're doing something about this, the most they're doing is what? They're going to give you a tax credit if you spend $60,000 on a brand new electric vehicle from General Motors. Part of me can get why they're so angry about what's going on.
I think something else that probably makes them angry is the fact that because there are few conflicting agendas around, they're probably frustrated by the fact that their message is getting watered down by their own side. I mean,
Yeah.
Just look at the news recently. Razi likes to mention it. The people who say that the carbon capture technology is just an excuse to continue using fossil fuels. Well, do you want to reduce the emissions, or do you want to get rid of fossil fuel altogether? Are you totally against humanity and against human prosperity, or are you for the environment? Clearly, the environment in their heads take advantage on human lives. And Greta herself, I think, I can't remember exactly what she said, but she effectively said the socialist way is the right way to tackle this thing. And every time the mask slips from these guys, it's always a red faces underneath. It's always communism or you know, the goddess Gaia who's got priority on you.
And there's definitely an anti-rich undertone to it all. I mean, we have the same problems that you were just outlining there, with Range Rovers being having their tyres slashed en masse in places like London, or stars like Emma Thompson in particular attending climate protests and then going off yachting around or flying all across the globe moments later, literally moments later. And the hypocrisy is just, you know, is rife.
It's so unique. It's just...
Yeah, I'll quickly just say that the book, I know I'd really recommend on this, I'm sure the guys would as well, is Rand's The New Left, The Anti-Industrial Revolution, I believe published probably in the 90s as this collection of great essays all on this topic of the ecology movement, the environmental movement. So I would certainly recommend that, you know, as a great place to start learning more about this issue, objectivist perspectives on this issue.
Absolutely, that's the one updated as the Return to the Primitive. Is that yes. Right? Whose own title says an awful lot about the intentions of many of these ecologists and people. They actually want us to go backwards and become, you know, inferior humans once again.
I mean, there are lots of signs. Like if you got somebody from the 70s teleported here now, they probably would think they're still in the 70s. I mean, the stuff that's going on right now is just, talk about regression. It's just incredible.
Certainly in terms of the ideas and the rhetoric that you're hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep in mind, they're not going to stop at fossil fuels. And we've seen this with the Michael Moore. It was technically directed by someone else, but I think he produced it. I think it's called Planet of the Humans or something along the lines. And the whole gist of the movie is about how like a lot of people have cashed in on climate hysteria, and that a lot of the so-called solutions like solar panels, electric vehicles, wind turbines, a lot of what they would call moneyed interests, if it just try to cash in on it so that they can make money by cashing in on all of these government favors and whatnot. And even Greta No Thunberg, I remember reading months ago how she was at a protest in Norway, protesting the development of not an oil pipeline, not an oil refinery, but wind turbines, because they upset the local reindeer population, if I'm getting my facts straight. And even recently, it was reported that the governor of Illinois, I think his name is Pritzker, he vetoed a law that would have made it easier for the state of Illinois to greenlight nuclear energy, which, as we know, is a safe, more reliable alternative to fossil fuels, especially compared to solar and wind. And he was applauded by the Sierra Club, which is one of these activist organizations that's really hysterical about climate change.
Yeah, I mean, they hate all types of energy that's effective, right? I mean, they love the type of energy that is ineffective, which, again, I'm paraphrasing, but, Rand, I think, kind of identified the environmental movement as being an anti-capitalist movement, an anti-man movement. And, you're seeing that play out, even the fact that it's been legitimized and kind of interwoven into almost every element of modern day life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think wider beyond the environmentalist issue, you're giving such a poor lesson to young people that things like anger are the driving force for convincing somebody of an argument, and that force is therefore justified because you're angry, because you want a certain thing to occur. So you've got the moral right, supposedly, to enforce it upon others. And that's a really poor lesson for young people across the world.
Yeah, I got a quote from Return of the Primitive right here. The old-line Marxists used to claim that a single modern factory could produce enough shoes to provide for the whole population of the world, and that nothing but capitalism prevented it. When they discovered the facts of reality involved, they declared that going barefoot is superior to wearing shoes.
Right. And here we are. That's exactly where we are with today's environmental movement. Greta No Thunberg included.
Anyway, I think that's all. Those were the topics that we have to discuss today. Unless anyone has any other thoughts that they want to share on any of today's topics.
Just thanks to our subscribers and thanks to our audience.
So just to mention, in the search of the prisoner escaped in Pennsylvania, I'm sorry to have to report there was a sad loss. A search dog, unfortunately, was hit by the heat and he had to be medicated. But although the gender was undisclosed, he or she should be fine. He's under medical attention.
Positive end, perhaps.
Yay.
But any last words from you, Mr. Honig?
No. Again, just thanks to our viewers and our subscribers. And actually coming up tonight at, I will mention, at 10 p.m. UK, it's Life on Earth with Robert Nasser, all about I don't know. Don't miss it.
And then I think someone else says Razi will be speaking in Denver, Colorado on September 30th, 1 to 4 p.m. in the Wincoop Brewing Company. Just in case you're in the area, attendance is free except for the cost of food and beverages. All right. Yeah, and I would say today is the kickoff of the NFL season. So all I have to say is go Lions. And if no one else has anything else to say today, I want to thank everyone for watching today. Don't forget to like and subscribe, hit that share button. For Marco and Richard and Jonathan Honig, I'm Kirk Wilcox. Thanks for hanging out today and have a wonderful rest of your day, folks.
Thank you.